Alright, welcome back guys into our series for data science, and today we're going to be talking about lists, tuples, and dictionaries in this video. Now I did take a while to upload this video, but I've been a little bit busy, so hope you enjoy. Now let's get right into it. Jump right into lists and tuples. So we're going to first go over lists. Now lists, I just want to make this clear and I want to show you what the syntax for a list is. The syntax for a list, it's going to be two brackets, just like this. So we have two brackets, and now within these brackets you can house pretty much any data type. So for instance, you can have integers, you can even have floats. Oh, excuse my handwriting. You can have floats, you can have strings, and so on and so forth. So we'll just talk about these three main data types. So we can house in integers, floats, and strings. So now let's move down over here, and we're going to go into here. Let's do a comment. So we're going to do lists examples. All right, here we go. Lists are ordered sequences. So what is an ordered sequence? So if we go over here back to the whiteboard, an ordered sequence is just like it sounds like. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So now, but what I mean as an ordered sequence is, so if we write a variable, let's say x, and we set this equal to, and remember syntax, we're going to be two brackets. Inside our bracket, we're just going to do integers. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. The reason I say it's an ordered sequence, it's because it follows a linear path. You start from 1 and the list continues on to 5. So now this brings us into our next topic of indexes, right? If you recall, just like strings, you can pretty much do the same thing with lists. So for example, let's print. We're gonna print x. First off, we're gonna see what it gives us. So we're gonna run. So as you can see, it's gonna show us our whole list. It has the brackets 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then close brackets. So now let's index. We'll go. Remember, in Python, the computer starts at 0. So if we start at 0, we're gonna be our first cell block. Our first cell we should get 1, and we do get. So we get 1, and like I said, we can index all the way. We can do 3, and we should get 4. So now, just like strings, if you remember, we can also do -1. We can also do -1, and there we go. We get the last number. So now, if we keep incrementing by -1, also -2, we should get 4, and the list goes on. You can keep messing with it. Get yourself familiar with it. So here we'll do 3, and there we go. If we go 5, 4, 3, and we can go -2 and keep going until 1. So yeah, that's pretty much the whole thing with indexes. And now here, let's change things up. We're gonna make 3 into a comment. To a string. We're gonna put our parentheses on it. It doesn't have to be a number. We can still do 3. And now let's see what happens when we print it out. There we go. We have 5, 4, and 3. If you're confused about the numbering of the negative, we'll take it off. We'll see what it gives us. There you go. 2, 3, 4. Index 1. So remember, this is going to be 0. 1, 2, 3, 4. If I go over here to the whiteboard, here we'll take all this out. And something I really like to do when it starts getting more complicated, I usually draw out my little list or array, whatever you want to call it, and for our purposes I'll just do 4. So this is going to be index 0, 1, 2, and we have 3, and so now we're going to put in our number 1, number 2, and here we have a string of 3. Really poorly written, but yeah. And then over here we'll have 4. So that's pretty much what our list is looking like. So yeah, that should cover it for indexes. Again, just remember the syntax. So if you're going to call a list, you're going to want to do the list variable name it's stored in. So we're storing it in X. So we're going to do X, and then we're going to want to call it with brackets, and then we're going to input an index, whatever the index is. So let's move past this, and here we go. I'll just comment this out. Let me comment this out real quick, just like that. Okay, so now we're going to move on to concatenation. All right, so now let's say we have our list X, and we're going to do X, Y. And we're going to create another list, and we're going to append 5, right? And then we're going to want to make, we'll say 6. Yeah, we'll keep it, it's all the same. And then we'll do 7. Now remember, you don't have to use double parentheses, you can do single parentheses. But you want to make sure to stay consistent just so it doesn't look sloppy. So we have X and we have Y. And now remember, a little refresher, you can have variable names, they do not have to be X and Y. They can be literally anything as long as you don't break whatever something exists. So here, we'll call this one first. And I like to use the camel method. So first, and then we'll do first list. Camel method is just lowercase up here, the first part lowercase, and then the second part is uppercase. So we'll do first list, and then over here we'll do second, and then list, and there we go. So now we have two variables, first list, second list, and then we'll make a new variable called concat underscore lists. There you go. That's just a variable. I'm basically saying we're going to concatenate. If you don't know what concatenate means, it's basically like this. So let's say we have a string over here. Or you know what, it doesn't have to be a string. Whoops. Let's say you have the letter H, right? And if you add the letter I, you should get an output of hi. So this is in strings. So now let's apply the same concept to our lists. So if we have lists over here, we're going to go over here, and we're going to do first, and I'm going to use the handy IDE, and I'm just going to hit enter for my words. And there we go. So we have concat lists, and we're going to concatenate first list and the second list. So we have first list and second list. So it's basically what it's going to do. It's going to take 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it's going to take 5, 6, and 7, and it's going to build it into one single list. So if we go over here, let's just erase all of this. If we go over here, and we're going to want to print it, so we'll do print, and we're going to print our variable concat lists. Let's see what it gives us. And there you have it. It's going to give us 1, 2, 3, like mentioned up here. So it's going to give us our first list, 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and it's going to continue to add in 5, 6, and 7. So just like strings, you can concatenate them. And yeah, that's pretty much all it follows. You can also do it like this. So if we have, let's say 1, 2, 3, and then we want to add another list. So we'll do 4, 5, and 6. Let's see what it gives us. And there you have it. So you can store them in a variable, or you can just add the list themselves, just a little FYI, or you can, of course, here we'll delete this, and we'll do a variable with hard-coded values, and it gives you the same thing. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're adding 4, 5, 6. So that should cover everything about what is it called? Concatenation. So we're going to move on into slicing. Yeah, there you go. Slicing and dicing. So as mentioned before in strings, so if we have a string, we'll just make a variable string, just a little refresher. And then we'll have dog, just like last time. We'll have dog. So in order to slice, we're going to want to pull the index. So we're going to get string, and then we're going to want to slice it. So what are we going to want to slice? We're going to want to slice the DO. So as mentioned before, we're just going to do 0, 2 dots, the colon, and we're going to want to give it an offset. So if we have dog, and now just remember, everything is pretty much barred off. So we have an index of 0, 2, 1, and then 2. So if we want to get DO, we're going to want to give it an offset plus 1. So we're going to want to get 0 to 1 plus 1. So it's going to be 0 to 2. So now let's run this real quick. Here, let us print this out so we can see it. What do we get? DO. Okay, so now let's apply the same method to a list. So let's create a list of dog. Oh, here, let's change that to list so we don't get confused. All right, so we're gonna want to create a list. Okay, we're gonna create a list of strings. So we're gonna do D, and then we're gonna do O, and then we're gonna do G. Right, so we have D, O, G. We have essentially a list. Interesting. Very, very interesting. So now, what we saw in the string is the same thing as a list, right? So if we have D, O, G, it's the same thing as doing that. Very similar. So now that it's not a string, so we just pretty much just take away the whole string part, and it's just a list. Now we can also we'll do list 2, and we'll equal it to DOG. Now this is very different than list number 1. This is list 1, and over here we'll have the second one. This is essentially what we have. We have just dog, and this is at index 0. So now let's see if what's going on. So we're gonna go to list, and we're gonna pull out D. We're gonna go from 0, and we're gonna give it an offset of 1. So we'll see what we get. There you go. You get returned the whole list because it's a list, but you're gonna get the D, and you're gonna get the O. So you can essentially slice a list also. And now let's see if we do this onto the second one. What will happen? We get dog. We get the whole entire word dog because they're not separated into values. This is one single index. One single index for dog as 0. So just something to be mindful about. So let's move on. Let's move on. And now that we've covered about slicing, one important thing I want to talk about is lists are mutable. So what does that mean? And sorry, but my video failed twice on me, so I'll just comment this out real quick and we'll get to that later. So we'll talk about why lists are mutable. So if we create a variable called list and we assign it values such as 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? If we go over here and we call for list, and we want to change, let's say, the first index. So the first instance in our list, which is going to be the 0 case, we're going to want to set this equal to, and we'll change this to a string. Or, yeah, we'll change it to a string. We'll call it the 1 string, right? So if we go over here and we print list before we try to change it, what are we going to get? We get our original 1, 2, 3, 4. So now let's see what happens when we call for list and we change it to 1. So if we run this, we get the word 1, and then we get 2, 3, and 4. So why is this important? Well, lists are mutable. So now let me show you. Oh, and I think I got rid of my canvas. All right. So let's just change this over here. Well, no, here we'll make a new variable called string, and we'll call it dog. All right, and we want to change it to fog. So if we go over here and we call for string, what do you guys think is gonna happen? I'll give you a couple seconds to think. Okay, so now let's run it. There we have it. We have a type error. String object does not support item assignment. So now why is that? Well, that's because strings are mutable, not immutable. Strings are immutable, meaning that you cannot change them. The values that they hold cannot be changed. Lists, on the other hand, are mutable, right? So that pretty much sums it up for mutability. So let's go ahead and get rid of this, and now let's talk about nesting. So let me just erase this, and now I'm gonna go a little bit faster because I had already finished the video twice. So I'll just go a little bit faster. So here we have list, and what I have here is I have the list. This whole thing, I have two brackets. So if we call one bracket and two brackets, you see it's highlighted in yellow. That's the initial list. But now I have another list inside of this list. So let's see how we are going to get these values. So to start, let me just comment these out real quick. And I am going to want to call list. And I'm going to call the first value. So let's go over here and let's print our first value. So as you should remember, we're going to get 1. We're going to get the first instance of 1 over here. So this index 0. So if this is 0, this is 1. This is 2, 3, 4. Well, what's 5 after this comma? All of this list. So now let's go over here and let's print out 5. Let's see what we get. So we get the second list as a whole. We're not getting in one value. We're getting the whole entire list because the whole entire list is at this value. So now, in order to access these numbers, as you might have saw while I was commenting these things out, is I'm calling it as sort of a matrix. So this is, think of it like this. Imagine as if I had, no, I think that's a bad example. Just, we're calling the index where the list starts, and then we're going to start off by indexing. So if we run this real quick, let's see what we get. So we have 6, 7, 8, and 9. So index 0 at this new list is 6, and then 1 is 7, 2 is 8, and 9 is 2. And that pretty much sums up for nesting lists within lists. You can nest another list inside of this list. I mean, you really don't have a limit. So yeah, and that pretty much covers that for lists. And now we're going to be talking about tuples. Now tuples are really similar to everything I had just mentioned about lists, so I'm not going to go too in depth. Just know that lists are just like tuples, just like lists are ordered sequences, meaning they can be followed linearly. So again, if we have a list, this is the first index, second index, third index, and just likewise in Y, we have the first index, second index, and the third index. So they're ordered sequentially, right? This is an index 0, this is an index 4. It starts from 0 and goes all the way to the last value, right? So that, and like I just mentioned, these have indexes also. And now I'm going to show you that we can definitely concatenate them. So what we're going to want to do is, here, I'll erase this. We're going to do x plus y because I have an x tuple and I have a y tuple. But before we jump into this, here, let's make sure this is a tuple. So we're going to want to call our type function, and let's just input x. Yeah, we'll just input x. And there you go. We have a class and it's a tuple. So just confirming it so you don't get mixed up. And this is the syntax for a tuple. It's just very similar to that of a list. So the list is just you create the variable equals, and then you have two brackets. So you have the bracket here and you have the closing bracket over there. Well, lists are similar, but you're going to be using parentheses. And the way to index them is just exactly like a list. You're going to two brackets and give it its index, and you have 1. What's that index 0? 1. Well, what's that index 1? 2.0, float, right? So now let's go back and concatenate them. So if you remember from strings, we can concatenate strings. Well, we can concatenate lists and tuples. So let's do y, and we're going to print out our output. So we have the first set all the way up to 3, and then our second tuple from 4, 5, and 6. And now the big difference from tuples and oh, and also you can slice them too. Here, let me just do that real quick. Yeah, we'll just slice it from 0 to 2. See what we get. We get the 1 and all the way to the 2, right? So that covers that. Now immutability. Okay, so if you remember, if we wanted to change a list, all we had to do is call that, say the value we wanted to change. So let's say we want to change the 2. We wanted to change the value 2, so it's at index 1, 0, 1, 2. So if we wanted to change 2, it's at index 1, and let's just change this into a string 2. Well, let's run it and see what happens. We get an error. It says tuple object does not support item assignment, much like that of a string. If you recall, we got the same type error except it said str. So yeah, same thing. Pretty much tuples are immutable. So that should wrap that up. And yeah, that covers pretty much tuples. You can go look for more documentation. I'm just giving you the general idea of what it is and introducing it to you if you don't understand. Now dictionaries. Oh yeah, dictionaries was a good one, but no worries. We'll go over here. And now dictionaries are very different from strings, and they're very different from lists, and they're different from tuples. Now let me explain as to why. Excuse me. So let me explain to you why dictionaries are different. So in order to declare a dictionary, we're going to want to do X, like we've always been doing. We can name it whatever you want. Dictionary, right? But that's too long right now, so we'll just do X. And we're going to want to use brackets. So now we've used, we're going to be using brackets. We're not going to be using any more. Wait, what are these called again? I don't remember. Whatever, we're going to be using these brackets. And let's fill this dictionary up. But first things first, let's make sure this is a dictionary. So let's do print. And then we're going to want to do type to get the type of object it is. And let's get X. And there you go. It pops up class dictionary. All right. So now let's start filling up our dictionary. So in order to do this, here we go. In order to fill up our dictionary with values inside of it, I want to explain to you what a dictionary really is. So now a dictionary is pretty much a value associated with a key. So it's 2 pairs. It's 2 pairs. So think about it like this. Let's see, we'll say 1 is associated to the name John, right? So keep this in mind. So if this is associated to that, well, let's create an instance for that. So how are we going to create an instance for this? Quite simple. All we have to do is we're going to want to call X. We're going to fill this up, and we're going to give it its key value of 1. And we're going to set this equal to John. So now we're going to want to print X over here, and we're going to run it. Let's digest what this means first. So let's open this up. Let's zoom in. So the string 1 is linked to the string John, right? And we're going to print X. So we print X and we get the dictionary, the key 1, and it's linked to the word John. So now what happens if we get the key 1 And now I'm just going to change. No, well, I'll wait in a minute. So we're going to be calling for X, and this is the key, not the index, the key. Let's run this. We get John. This is the value associated to 1, right? And we filled up X with the key 1 and John. So now let's start off from scratch. So let's move up over here. So over here I had already prepared a dictionary. So I have the dictionary X. Now let's just make sure this is a dictionary. So we're going to do type like we've been doing in the past. Type X, and let's see what we get. And we get a dictionary. Just as before. We get class dictionary. So it's the same thing. This is the same thing. But I'm going to actually, here, I'm going to just copy, oops, I'm going to go copy and paste this instance down here. And I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to comment this code out. And let's fix this. Yeah, there we go. So we have name. We have the name associated with the first. Okay, this is a nested example. I'm sorry. Let's just redo it, the whole thing. We'll start it from scratch. We'll set it equal to. And we're going to set the value number 1. And we're going to link this to just John. And then we're going to create another instance for another key 2. And we're going to set this equal to, how about another name? How about dog? And over here, like I said, it can be anything. So we'll create a new key and we'll call this 4. And we'll give this the link for bread, right? So now let's see what this looks like. So we're going to print out X, the whole entire dictionary, and we'll see what we get. So we get our whole thing. We get 1 and its link is John, 2 and its link is dog, and 4 and its link is bread, right? So now let's retrieve 4, right? We're going to use the key value. This is the key. Think of these as doors. You're going to, if you call for 4, if you're going to use the 4 key, then it's going to open up this door for bread. And there we go. We return bread. So this is a little different because it's not a sequential. It's order does not matter. For you to better understand me, order does not matter. And that's pretty much the syntax. This is how you call for the keys. You can also fetch the key, but we'll probably go through examples in the future. I'm just going to do a brief overview. So now that we've got that over with, just want to make sure that you understand that we can definitely nest these. If you remember for lists that I was nesting. So let's go over here and let's see what I broke over here. Definitely what I delete. Okay, yeah, there. That's what I deleted. Deleted that. So now here we have the key name. And what's inside of this key is another dictionary. That's pretty strange. So let's explore this a little bit. So we're gonna call for name, the key name, and it's gonna return us to a new dictionary. So in order to access this dictionary, it's the same way as nesting. You just create another set of brackets, and let's call the key for first. Let's try to get the first name. So we're in name. We're in name over here. You see it over here. We're in name. And then we're going to call first, so we should get John. So if we call this, yeah, you bet you get John. So this is pretty much all you need to know. And for the most part of data structures, I hope I explained it pretty good. So now we're going to try to do jobs over here. We're going to go to jobs, this key. So now we're going to get a list. Okay, well lists are sequential. So if they're sequential, this must be index 0 and index 1. So why don't we try that? Let's try to get manager. And there you have it, manager. And that's pretty much all there is to it, as I mentioned before. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to explain or elaborate it more in depth if you wish. But other than that, everything will start clicking once we start understanding why we're using these data structures and combining our types and expressions and variables. Next, in our next episode for conditions, loops, functions, objects, and classes. And as I mentioned before, then we're going to move on with working with data in Python, and then we're going to start getting into the good stuff. But yeah, I definitely wanted to make sure if you're following this and don't understand what's going on, that you're not completely lost and you understand. Because I mean, I can honestly explain this. I really enjoy computer science, but I can only do so much in 30-40 minutes. So I hope I wasn't too confusing, and definitely leave your comments, like the video if you found it enjoyable, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.